Right, finally back on track. So if you didn't see the last few, I went exploring and investigating on how to actually tinker with, well, you can probably tell because I have it on, custom armor trims and the materials. So I have redone all of that, but that's not what we're here for today, no. So I skipped one, basically. We didn't actually go over the functions used for the status effect system. So that's obviously what we're going to tackle today. How exactly am I checking, right? If entities have certain tags, so for instance, if we tag ourselves with, what's a good one? We'll just use boost, right? So if I tag myself with boost, eventually, there you go, we get a particle effect and we get some increased speed. So these are the status effects, and again, all I'm doing is checking whether or not an entity has a certain tag and then giving them different effects depending on the tag that they actually have. Alright, let's get into the technical stuff. So here we have it, my data pack folder, right? Runechant data, Runechant functions, and boy oh boy is it growing. So I have actually gone ahead and done my armor system, or started to, I should say. But anyway, that's not what we're going over. That's probably what we'll touch on next. We have here particle, effect, all the different statuses. Then we scroll down further, we have status effect, and then all the different statuses. And then we have a few basic ones that run all of the brain work. I don't know how to really explain it, so we'll just open up some stuff and start talking about it. So we've got apply, that seems like a very important one. And then off of apply, we'll just grab two of the different statuses. So we'll do Bane, status effect, and then we'll look for particle effect Bane. Perfect. So they all link together. And then we also have tick status effects and status effects clear. Anything else? Main hand particle, sure, that's important too. And I believe that's all of them. Clear item, apply. The apply also runs the remove. Yeah, okay, looks good. Well, actually, no, there should be the function for the remove. I'm pretty sure it should be like status effect. There we go, remove with an S. So that would always go to the bottom. So we have a bunch, well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 to go through. I should probably order these so I know the correct order to talk about, right? Right, so starting off. There is a giant wall of text, right? We'll keep it small so you can still see Minecraft. But that's about right. Maybe a little bit skinnier. Okay. Let's also open the inventory so at least there's some background music while we discuss things. So, very simple. We have execute as at all, the player. Score equals status apply greater than 1. Then it checks the inventory to look for the copper waxing flask with X status. So remember, once we actually craft them, I should have them up here still, it displays a little lore text that corresponds to the different status effects. Right? Yeah, so for instance, this says Venom, Toxic, Swell, Sunder, Bleed, etc. And that's what we're checking. So we check the inventory to make sure that that's in the offhand, so slot -106. And then if it matches the corresponding status effect, we check our luck stat. And then we apply bleed to the nearest entity. So entity, distance 1 to 5 blocks, limit 1, sort nearest, and then type, we've gone over entity tags before, so this is just all mob entities in the game. Okay, so essentially all I'm doing is checking when we attack. This is the status of player 1, and that's using the custom inbuilt Minecraft scoreboard. So if you do minecraft.custom, and then it's damage dealt is the melee check, right? So anytime we attack an entity and apply damage, this will increase by 1, and then this whole function will run. It'll check our offhand to see if we have a status effect vial, and then apply the corresponding status effect to the entity if we pass the luck check. So again, the luck check is our luck plus 100 multiplied by 10, and if it is equal to or greater than the RNG number rolled at the time of executing this command, it will apply the status effect. So altogether, seems like a lot, but it is fairly simple. And the best thing is it's obviously easily repeatable. So all I have to do is change bleed, for instance, to one of the other status effects, and that's all I had to do. Right, so just again, in Excel, I would type out the base command, and then all the different statuses so that I could just easily swap them in and out and create these giant lists. Then we also have this. So again, after it checks and tries to apply a status effect, it is going to add 2 to our copper flask use scoreboard. So if you remember, if you've seen the other one, once this scoreboard hits 50, it clears our offhand item. Okay, so that means that all the status effects are limited to, in this case, 25 uses, because the basic one applies 2 to the scoreboard, whereas the advanced status vial flask, copper flask, we'll use the correct terminology, only applies 1. Right, so the 2 different variants, you've got 25 uses and 50 uses to apply status effects. So that is the tag application side of things. Then we actually have to get into the status effects, which are probably the better side to look at, right? Because these are the fun and interesting things. So we do have a tick status effects running, so every tick this is running, and then if these different timers match, it's going to run the corresponding status effect function. So this is the thing that actually applies the effects of the status. So the reason I've set up the timers is so that every function is on a different tick. So over a course of 12 seconds, it's going to run each status effect at a different point. What this means is that I've drastically cut down server lag. Right? If these were all running the same tick every tick, it would be checking a lot of entities, it would be checking us a lot, checking our data a lot, and it would cause a lot of TPS. So it's really helpful to split things up and understand how often you need to cause things to actually run, right? So for instance, even on the rune traps, because this is a good point. Do I have any? I don't have any made up. The rune traps in themselves only run every half a tick. So I don't need to run it for every tick, because every tick is a second, and the amount of time that it takes you to run over a block, for instance, is roughly a quarter of a tick, so a quarter of a second. Okay, so at full speed or increased speed, you could probably sprint over them, which is fine. You know, that's a good mechanic. But overall, I don't need to run it every tick. I don't have to check for the entities every tick, and altogether, I can cut down on the TPS lag. So it's really important to think about when you're building, you know, a large data pack. Okay, so check the timer. Then we simply run all the different status effects. The one we've pulled up is Bane. So I generally just use 2 commands for the majority of status effects. Bane is a bit different because it is one of the stackable status effects. So every time you hit the target, if they have Bane 1, they'll get Bane 2, and then 3, and 4, and 5, and so on. Well, it stacks to 5. I forgot about that. I'm pretty sure I only made them stack to 4. Interesting. But yeah, so generally I only use 2 commands. So execute as at entities, and then we're searching for the tag corresponding to the status effect, and then we run our effect command and a particle command. So in this case, the particle is just warped roots as an item, so a nice little green particle, so poisonous, and then the actual effect is simply just give poison to that entity. But you could change this for a lot of different things, right? You could make it TP the entity, you could make it equip the entity with armor, you could make it do all different things just by changing the run command. So altogether, for status effects, I generally just use 2 commands. One for the actual effect of the status effect, and then one for the particle or the indicator for the status effect. After that, we also have a bit more to go over down here. So at the 30-second mark, it's going to check if the RNG variable is between 0 and 125, in which case it will clear the status effects. Otherwise, it will then do it at a minute. Check again, a larger interval, run the status clear. Otherwise, at 2 minutes, it will always clear the status effect. So what this means is the least amount of time for a status effect to be active is around 30 seconds. The most amount of time would be 2 minutes. Okay, so it's really useful because I can create this dynamicism with the status effects. You apply a status effect and there's no set interval for it to actually run and clear, because this isn't a game with obviously HUDs, right? So there's no overhead display or anything like that to show that the entity is suffering with a status effect. So I think having a bit random is more of a nice feel than I applied, I've got to wait 30 seconds like a normal potion effect, and then it's done, right? The entity might die from it, the entity might not. Altogether, I like the randomness of it. And of course, the function that corresponds to that is just status effects remove, which is simply just clearing all the different tags from every single entity in the game. So whenever that runs, it will delete all the different tags related to all the different status effects from any entity that has it in the game. So it automatically just clears everything, right? Altogether, it is performing a lot of entity checks. So you could split this up and do something like execute as entity if they have the tag. I don't know if that causes more lag, because theoretically what the game still does, it still checks every entity, right? It would just mean on some of them it does it twice, on some of them it only does it once. So altogether I've just left it as tag at E remove. So again, just a blank statement to remove every single status effect in the game at either the 30-second interval, 1 minute, or 2 minutes. After that, we have our particles. So again, I've just made a blanket one to run all the different particle effects at different times so that they don't all run at any given tick and there isn't an abundance of tick lag. Then for the actual particle effects, all I'm doing is checking the orientation of the player. So Y rotation, and then of course the inventory again to check which poison they have. So in this case, if you have Bane, it's going to display particle effects in the hand. I don't know if these still work because I did change the titling. Instead of copper flask, I did copper waxing flask to make it a bit more indicative. But it should just look for the offhand, so it should still be giving me the particle every few seconds. Yep, so you can see it just shoot up from my main hand there, indicating that the status effect is active. So that's the other thing. The remake of this system, there is no delay. As soon as you equip a status effect, you can apply it. Before, I was applying different checks to the player to then run the different systems. Altogether, that wasn't necessary. It was causing more lag than this system because it was adding in more entity checks. And entity checks are, by and large, the worst thing when it comes to tick lag in Minecraft. So be careful with all the different checks you're running in your data pack. Right, what else did we leave off? Just the cleanup of the copper flask. So again, once copper flask is greater than 50, that's indicative of the uses. So again, it gets +2 every time we use a basic flask, and then it gets +1 every time we use one of the advanced flasks. So as soon as it gets above 50, it's going to play the glass break sound, and then also shoot off some glass particles, and clear all the different flasks from our inventory. Now, the good thing about this, because it is running from the inventory and only clearing one, if you have multiples of the same flask, it's going to remove them from your inventory before your offhand. Meaning that in terms of a system, right, you could fill up your inventory with the status effect you want to use for combat, and you could not really worry about the uses till you're on the very last flask. Altogether, it's a lot, but it is very repetitive. So if you were to completely break it down and just use the basis of the system, right, so again, just checking when we strike an entity, using the inbuilt custom scoreboards, as well as our inventory to determine which status effect we have, and then just applying a tag to the nearest entity, because that's most likely the entity we hit, right? Granted, there is knockback and a bit of other issues, but in terms of entity detection, this is probably the best you're going to do if you don't just, well, set up scoreboard systems to track, say, UUIDs of entities closest to you. Altogether, it's enough. Right, so we apply the status effect, then we're just running the actual functions for each status effect at different intervals within a given tick, so that there's not too much tick lag, and then the status effects in themselves are usually made up of 2 commands, one to run the effect, and then one to run the particle, indicating that they're afflicted with the status effect. After that, all we have to do is worry about the particles in hand. This is more of an additive system, it's not really necessary, which is a little bit more complex. I have tested a few different ways to sort of determine where to play the particles using the up arrows, which swap it from your coordinates to positioned off of you. It doesn't quite work because they function off of the head tilt, meaning that they're not always on a specific spot of the player, right? If you're looking up, they're behind you. If you're looking forward, they could be right next to you. So altogether, using the up arrows, I don't actually know what they're called, wasn't going to work. So I just have 8 different zones, right? So 8 different directions you can look. You get a lot more specific with it if you wanted to have it a bit more dynamic. But I think 8 is perfect. So if you're looking north, northwest, which is that way, west, and so on, it's going to play particles corresponding to the main hand of the player model. Then after that, we just have our cleanup for the actual copper flask use, so that they're not just permanent. Again, I don't want to just make permanent systems, because then there's no real point in coming up with, say, a big, or well, not really big, but interesting crafting systems if the player's just going to use it once and then be done. So I do like having things finite, and I am sort of against making anything infinite use. So we're checking how many times the players use it. I might up these though, because with the luck check, in 25 uses, you might not necessarily apply the status effect, and I don't want the player to feel gypped. Or I might change it so that it only consumes a use when you actually apply the status effect, which would be simple enough. All I have to do is add in the luck check greater than RNG to this actual command, right? So it only increases the player's scoreboard if that luck check is passed. And then we just have the status effect cleanup, which is simply just removing every single status tag. Okay, hopefully that was somewhat understandable. Don't know how I feel, honestly, with the technical stuff. Because again, I'm not great at teaching. I can explain to you what I've done. If it makes sense to you, great. Otherwise, oh well. But if you enjoyed, let me know, right? And thanks for watching. See ya.